Minister, I know that you've gone across the country, as have I, and met with police forces. What I'm hearing is that they are stretched quite thin. Are you hearing the same thing?
Thank you, Ms. Dancho. There's no doubt that we need to support law enforcement, domestic law enforcement, and that's one of the reasons why.
So, sorry,
we
Minister,
have
what I'm asking is, have you also
anti-gun.
heard that police
Sorry,
forces...
if I could
what
just
I'm
complete
asking
the
is,
answer.
if you have heard that police forces their resources are stretched quite thin, they're having challenges keeping up with the crime that we're seeing. That's what I have heard. Do you agree?
I was trying to complete my answer, Ms. Dancho,
yes
and I think I'm being responsive to your question, which is that I acknowledge that we need to support domestic law enforcement, which is what we are doing through our anti-guns and gangs fund. Those resources are being transferred to provincial and territorial partners, which in turn filters through to domestic police, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you, Minister. So I would take that as a tacit yes. You would agree that police resources are stretched thin and they require more resources. We're also seeing violent crime has increased over the past 7 years by 32%. Are you familiar with that statistic?
I'm alarmed by it, which is why we can't accept the status quo.
The Violent Crime Severity Index is also up 18 points, and there were more than 124,000 additional violent crimes last year than in 2015. Are you familiar with that as well?
I am, which is why we presented Bill C-21.
The vast majority of gun crime is caused by gangs and criminals using illegally obtained firearms. Do you agree?
Which is why we've got new tools in Bill C-21 to combat organized crime.
According to Toronto police, guns smuggled in from the United States represent upwards of 9 out of 10 handguns used in crime. Do you agree?
Which is why we invested $321 million since last year and seized a record number of guns last year at the border.
During the 2019 federal campaign, the Liberal platform stated that your confiscation regime of firearms would cost between $400 and $600 million. Recent estimates put it upwards of $5 billion. That's considerably more money than you're investing in additional border protection. Is that correct?
Well, I would begin by saying that assault-style rifles have no place in our communities, which is why we want to implement a buyback program to get them out once and for all.
I think it is very concerning that we're seeing a rise of gun violence in our cities, and as I've outlined, and you seem to have agreed that the problem certainly is gun smuggling, but you're investing considerably less money in border enforcement and considerably less money in community protection, although you've acknowledged that that is the primary source of gun violence in our country. I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about firearms owners. I am a firearm owner. Minister, I'm quite concerned of recent news that your government will be redirecting police resources, which we've outlined today in our conversation, are stretched quite thin, dealing with a 32% increase in violent crime since your government's been in office. You're planning to redirect RCMP resources and possibly other police resources to your confiscation regime. Can you comment on that?
Well, I think that it's based on some false assumptions, which
so
is
you
that,
won't be redirecting RCMP resources?
Well, again, if I could just be permitted to answer your question, which is a thoughtful one. Ensuring that police services who operate within provincial boundaries have the resources necessary to enforce laws to keep our communities safe is not mutually exclusive to buying back assault-style rifles. And the reason is simple. Those guns were designed with one purpose in mind, and that is to kill. And so we believe that by taking them out of our communities with the buyback program, with fair compensation,
if I may just conclude, I would urge you to reconsider redirecting police resources to your confiscation regime. I think it is reckless and will further endanger our communities, Minister. Thank you, Chair.
Minister, I have an engagement paper that was sent out by your department in October of 2018 that directly states under the heading International Experience that, quote, in all cases, the data does not conclusively demonstrate that these handgun or assault weapon bans have led to any reduction in gun violence, end quote. Your own ministry recognizes that there isn't data to support your buyback argument. Why are you wasting billions of dollars on a scheme that hasn't worked?
Before I begin, I wonder if I could be permitted to actually complete an answer. If you're not interested and you would just like to read from your sheet, you can do that. But I'd like to be able to finish. Is that okay? We took the decision to ban assault-style rifles because they were designed to kill. We looked at some very careful standards around the definition, which is contained in the order in council, and we are now setting about the launch of a buyback program so that we can get these guns out of our community, because we owe it to the victims to make sure there isn't another tragedy or a mass casualty.
The fact is, you don't have any studies that demonstrates that this is going to enhance public safety. Minister, since you believe that a gun buyback for law-abiding firearms owners will enhance public safety, as you just said, why are you also not launching a gun buyback for illegal firearms possessed by criminals?
Well, in the first instance, we've put in place a national handgun freeze and a ban on importing additional handguns into the country, which is a measure you oppose.
I'm talking about buybacks, though, Minister.
Well, if I could just be permitted to finish, Mr. Lloyd. You also oppose our national ban on assault-style rifles, and you would propose to make them legal again, which we think
You're
is
not answering the
fundamentally wrong.
question, Minister. You're dancing around the question. Why don't you have a program to buy back illegal firearms from criminals on the street? Why aren't you putting a program like that in place?
Well, we've taken a very concrete and tangible step forward to addressing handgun violence through the introduction of a national handgun freeze. And we're also going to get assault-style rifles out of our communities in collaboration with our
Minister,
partners.
wouldn't you agree that it'd be more beneficial for public safety to buy back an illegal firearm off the street rather than buying back a firearm from a sport shooter in Barrie, Ontario?
Well, the first thing I would say, Mr. Lloyd, and I've said this before, is that I respect law-abiding gun owners.
But then why do you have a program that only targets them? Why don't you have a program to get illegal guns off the street by buying it back from criminals?
Well, you and I disagree about that, but I do respect
You don't think that a
law-abiding owners.
buyback program for criminals would be effective?
We've taken the judgment that when it comes to assault-style rifles, that they have no place in our communities, and we've also taken the largest step forward, probably in a generation, with C-21, by putting in place a national handgun freeze so that we can reverse the trend and the growth of a universe of a type of gun by about 45 to 55,000 new registrations
Minister, my next
every year.
question is, you're seeking to cap magazine size to no more than 5 rounds. Is that correct, yes or no?
Yes.
Will this apply to all long guns or only semi-automatics?
Well, what we have proposed is certainly with regards to
Will it apply to all long guns?
no.
Okay, so will it, do you understand the Lee Enfield rifle is a commonly used hunting rifle? It has 10 rounds in the magazine. You're aware of that?
I have heard that.
Is the Lee Enfield rifle, because it has 10 rounds in its magazine, on the list of things that will be regulated?
Let me take a step back and tell you why it is that we've put these standards into the bill. We think that by doing so, that we will reduce gun violence.
See, the important thing, Minister, is that these firearms are predominantly used by Indigenous people to fulfill their traditional treaty hunting rights. And if you are limiting their ability to use a Lee Enfield because of C-21, you're limiting Indigenous rights. This violates Section 35 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. How is this not colonialism, Minister?
Well, we're consulting with Indigenous communities, and we have and will continue to consult on Bill C-21.
Good.
And we're listening very carefully to Indigenous leaders to make sure that for those who hunt as part of their tradition or who hunt to eat, that this bill will be consistent with those principles of reconciliation. And I assure you those conversations are ongoing.